Hello historians, and welcome to Purple Shirt History. In this video, we will go over the Paper 1 Part C question. This is the most important question in Paper 1. It's worth 10 marks. You have to answer 3 of them, so that's 30 marks total. If you find this video helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and I really appreciate it. We'll look at the different elements of the question, what's required, look at the mark scheme, how to get full marks, and how you can balance out the question to show 2 P.E.E.Ls for the pro and 2 P.E.E.Ls for the con. Also, you'll need to make a how far conclusion. This is usually phrased something like to a large extent, to a moderate extent, to a small extent. This is incredibly important to have a conclusion that matches the body of what you've written. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy the video. So here we have a Part C question about the League of Nations. I'll give you a second to read the question. I won't read it out for you. You can pause it if you want. So looking at this question, there's going to be a few things you're going to do as prep. So these 3 bullet points are the 3 steps you should take before actually answering your question. So read the question 2 to 3 times and underline the keywords. So Britain and France, so those are the countries this particular question is asking about. The keyword here is blame. Blame is something that needs to be assigned because the league failed, right? So is it just Britain and France? Is it other countries? Are there other factors? So think about all these things while you're making your plan. And when I say plan, I want you to make a T-chart. A T-chart is something that will separate your pro arguments and your con arguments. So take a look at this chart here right in the middle. Looks like a lowercase t. I have the keywords underlined and bolded for you there. And what we see here are 4 P.E.E.Ls. Point, evidence, explanation 1, point, evidence, explanation 2, and then on the con side, you're just going to do the same thing. So think about what are the main points that you need to make in order to assess blame. So I think this is a fairly good example question because the pro argument is pretty much set up for you nicely. So you need 2 P.E.E.L paragraphs and you have 2 countries in the question. Wonderful, that matches, right? So you're going to have Britain as one of your P.E.E.L paragraphs, as you can see by the change made there in the top left. And then you're going to have France as the other point. So I haven't done the evidence or explanation. You can practice that yourself. But then look on the con side. I chose 2 other countries because I think that's quite simple. So Italy is one of the countries under Mussolini there that was very destructive to the league. And Japan also was a member of the league that eventually dropped out and partook in some aggression during the 1930s that hurt the league. So in this particular instance, I use 4 countries, but there's other things you can use like the Great Depression. So pretty much after the Wall Street crash, the league didn't have success. It became a huge worldwide economic crisis and countries were less willing to cooperate with each other. So think about this. How are you going to set up your 2 pros? How are you going to set up your 2 cons? Looking at other practice questions, just do some prep work. That prep work will really save you a lot of time in the future when you're going to do your revision for your examination. So remember, in order to get full marks, you're going to need 4 P.E.E.Ls, 2 pro and 2 con. So what we're going to do now is look at the mark scheme. I'm going to show you 2 different types of mark schemes. If you remember the syllabus video, the mark schemes are located in there as well. You can find them, but you can go to cambridgeinternational.org and download a mark scheme or Paper Cambridge. If you remember the Part A video, I went over some of those there. So let's look at this generic mark scheme first. So what a generic mark scheme does, it just shows you the kind of broad levels with a little bit of detail on how to get into them. So 0 is 0, no creditable response, so that's how you get nothing. Level 1 writes about the topic but does not address the question. So we're going to look at some questions about Britain and France and the League of Nations. If you just talk about Germany for the entire essay and don't mention Britain and France at all, you're going to get about a 1. So please avoid that. Always address the question. Level 2, identifies or describes valid points, addresses the question but does not explain. 1 level 2 mark for each identification description. This is not following the P.E.E.L paragraph. So the part B, a video that I made, I showed you how to do the P.E.E.L paragraph. If you don't do that, you're going to get a bad grade. You're going to get down to level 2. So it's absolutely vital to P.E.E.L paragraph your part C. All right. Going up to level 3, explains one side. 1 level 3 mark for each explanation. All right, we're getting up there a little bit, but you wouldn't be thrilled with getting a 4 out of 10, a 5 out of 10, or a 6 out of 10. So for the questions that we'll look at, Britain and France, if you just say, yeah, it was all Britain and France's fault, they just were totally to blame for this, that would be a one-sided argument, and you don't want to do that. There were other factors. There were other countries that were responsible for damaging the League of Nations and the failures that occurred. There were things beyond Britain and France's control, like the Great Depression, the Wall Street crash, and all of the kind of protectionism and stuff that happened in the 1930s. So avoid this one-sided argument. Even if you really think, yeah, it was Britain and France's fault, they were to blame. Or on the other side, if you said, no, Britain and France did nothing wrong, it was all Germany and Japan's fault or Italy's fault or whatever. Even if you really believe that in your deep heart, you need to just show the balance, the pro side and the con side. So that will bring you up to level 4, explains both sides. For candidates to be awarded this level, they must have 1 explanation on each side. So with the balanced argument, and 2 P.E.E.Ls, you can get a 7. I wouldn't be thrilled with a 7 for my students. I want them to get the best grades possible, and I don't want you to be happy with a 7 either, 7, 8, or 9. 7 marks for 1 explanation on each side, 1 additional mark for each additional explanation on either side, right? So let's say you have 2 P.E.E.Ls that are on the pro side and 1 on the con side. 7 marks for 1 explanation on each side, 1 additional mark for each additional explanation on either side. By having more P.E.E.Ls, it's the more points you'll rack up, okay? 2 on each side, 7, 8, 9, right? 1 additional, you have those 2 extra P.E.E.Ls, you'll get those 2 extra marks. All right, here's the kicker. Level 5. This is what I want everybody watching this video to get. Explains both sides and supports a valid judgment on how far. All right. That means you have a valid conclusion. What I like to see in my students' part C is that they go full circle. So they have their how far statement in their introduction, and then they have their body paragraphs, and then they revisit in the conclusion their how far conclusion. So try to think of it as, your essay as going full circle. It ends where it began. So you'll say, it was Britain and France's fault to a small extent in the introduction, or you'll say to a medium extent, to a large extent. And then at the very end, in your conclusion, you'll revisit and rewrite that sentence saying, yes, it was to a large extent, small extent, moderate extent, whatever. All right? So this is the generic mark scheme. Please read this in your own time carefully. You can pause the video and check it out. You can ask me any questions in the comments about the levels or whatever, and I'd be happy to answer. So this was a generic mark scheme. Let me show you another mark scheme that could be quite helpful. This is one here with indicative content. What indicative content is are answers that Cambridge was looking for. So these were the things that would have got you marks. So this is also a very good revision resource because there may be a similar question in the future that might help you out to know these things that they were looking for in the past. So let's take a look at this. This is another League of Nations question, similar to the one in the PowerPoint slide there. It was the behavior of member states, not the structure of the League, that led to its failure. How far do you agree with this statement? Explain your answer. So, behavior of the member states could mean Britain and France. So any type of answers that you have for that particular question could be valid for this one as well. So let's look at the bottom first. I like to kind of look at the mark scheme from the bottom up because that's how you mark the actual answer. So level 0, skipping by that because that's a 0. Level 1, general answers lacking specific contextual knowledge. I think it was the structure of the league. This meant it never had a chance of success. Well, this is just a claim with no support. So this is not mentioning any specific content knowledge. It's not having any good structure. So that is a poor answer. Level 2, it identifies and or describes. 1 mark for each point. So this is kind of treating the question like it's a Part A question. If you remember that video, all you had to do is kind of state facts and you can get full marks for that. Not so much for the Part C. You're going to get a very low score, a 2 or a 3 out of 10, which is not what you want. So you're going to have the structure of P.E.E.L, which I showed you in the Part B video, and apply it here 4 times, 2 pro, 2 con. And as we go up to level 3, we'll see one-sided explanation or one explanation of both sides, 5 to 6 marks. Even if you really think it was Britain and France's fault, or if you really think it was the structure of the league that doomed it, or whatever, you need to have a objective kind of 2-sided argument as much as possible. So even if you really think it's to a large extent on one side or the other, that doesn't mean that you can just have a one-sided argument. You'll only get to level 3. One of the historical skills here we're trying to teach you in IGCSE is to look at things from multiple perspectives, all right? So if you only have 1 P.E.E.L on each side, you're going to be at level 3 as well. So that's why you need those extra P.E.E.Ls to get up to the highest levels, which is level 4 and level 5, right? Explanation of both sides. A level 4 answer will have a minimum of 3 explanations, 2 on one side, 1 on the other. This will be worth a mark of 7. So you need multiple P.E.E.L paragraphs here to really get to the top levels. And if you see that last line, an answer which only has 1 explanation on one side of the argument cannot be awarded more than 8. So one mistake I used to see all the time that thankfully I don't see much anymore is some students would just go absolutely crazy and write 4 or 5 P.E.E.L paragraphs on one side that were, pretty good, and then only 1 on the opposite side. So even if they had, 6 P.E.E.L paragraphs that were great, only 1 of them was on showing any balance. The 8 marks was the most marks that could be got. So I haven't seen that lately, thankfully. So it's nice to see that students are really showing balance more in their answers. So at least in my case. All right, now, how do you get full marks? So this is what I want everybody to get, obviously. So explains with evaluations of how far. So as level 4 plus evaluation, that just means you need a conclusion, right? You need to have something that says it was the behavior of the member states to a large extent, to a medium extent, to a small extent. Or if you think it was the structure of the league, same thing, to a large extent, medium extent, small extent, something like that. You need that sentence. That is a how far statement. Put it in your introduction, put it in your conclusion, make your essay come full circle, and be sure to include that sentence. It's very vital. You don't want to have an awesome essay with perfect P.E.E.L paragraphs and then you don't get the full marks because you don't have that one little sentence that says, to what extent. All right, so that is how you get full marks in Part C.